Hi, welcome to PowerPoint 4 in Human Ecology. The end. This should be the last one. I'm going to talk really fast on this one because I realized I talked a lot on the last one. So we're going to try to understand how we could help nature to balance, to proper balance ourselves. So how do we get nature back to normal? Well, we can go green. We can do the 3 R's, the real 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. So that way we limit waste of our resources. So, but there's a fourth R. Anyone want to guess? Reuse. Yes, I heard you all the way from Fort Ann. Very good. Or refuse. I used to refuse eating shrimp when I was younger. I used to drive my friends crazy at barbecues and stuff like that because I studied sea turtles and I knew that shrimp nets used to catch and kill sea turtles. They now have devised a net that releases sea turtles, and they discovered once they devised these nets that they actually are able to catch more shrimp. So it was a win-win situation. Now I don't have to refuse shrimp anymore. So that's just one example on how you could refuse, and there's many things you could do. Government regulations. Well, we know that locally, statewide, we could have regulations that reduce certain pesticides and fertilizers and types of chemicals that we use in our goods. We could limit the amount of pollution that cars give off, right? So there's a catalytic converter that's now legal. We used to have lead gas, and now we have non-leaded gas, stuff like that. We could create parks, right? The Adirondack State Park is the largest park in the continental United States. The only other parks that are bigger than the Adirondack State Park. So Yellowstone's not, glaciers not, everything that we read about. Yosemite is not larger. The Adirondack State Park is the largest. And it was designed because people downstate were wiping everything out, and they realized we have to put aside some land and preserve water and stuff like that. It was actually a benchmark for the world, the Adirondack State Park. And though it has its cons, it was an example that the world began to follow. If you missed that one, there was land preservations. Then there's alternative energy sources, different ways that we can get electrical power, like hydropower from water, wind power, solar power, alternative fuels like ethanol and natural gas. Now, I know there's pros and cons to all of these, and I'm not going to have time to get into those. But we'll explain, however, what E85 stands for. It stands for that 85% of the ethanol that you can put in your car has 15% gas in it. The reason that they do that is ethanol is drinking alcohol. So for like $2.19, you could get a gallon of moonshine, right? So they put 15% gas in it so people don't drink it. And then there's hybrid cars. That's what this says down here. All right. So here's hydropower. Here's one of the ways. If you see this thing here, this is actually a salmon run for the salmon to get by. We have solar panels, solar wind. To me, they're kind of unsightly, but especially like when I was in California and you start going towards Palm Springs, they're on these beautiful mountains, but they do give us an alternative power source. Obviously, solar, we know a lot about, and you're seeing more and more of that. Then there's the flex fuel that we just talked about, the E85. It's made from corn. And then the hybrid car. I was actually involved in one of the first hybrid car legislation that were on Long Island. We eliminated sales tax for hybrid cars so people would buy them. And the reason it's called hybrid is that they're both gasoline and electric. So when they're going downhill, they are generating electricity for the battery. Let's look briefly about bioaccumulation. I know it's not on your assignment sheet. Bioaccumulation is, if you remember the energy pyramid on how you lose energy as you go up the pyramid, well, unfortunately, as you go up the food pyramid, you gain certain poisons that are ingested by certain animals. So if you start with a zooplankton, which gets 0.04 parts per million, that's what ppm stands for. Every time they ingest something, then the fish has to eat more, right? Because they're going up that food pyramid. So they're getting more. And then at the top of your food chain, you'll have parts per million. We discovered this with bald-headed eagles and raptors. They would sit on their nests and their eggs would crack. That was one of the reasons why, besides the loss of habitat, that bald eagles were diminishing in population. So we eliminated the use of DDT. Problem is it really affects kids' bioaccumulation, which is why because we are predators, we're on the top of the food chain. So mercury is a big thing. 85% of mercury emissions of the United States are from fossil fuel. Again, these graphics need to be updated. So there you go. So China has actually passed us in carbon dioxide emissions. And they keep on growing. All right. Here's an overview of carbon monoxide emissions in the United States, and just how 82% of it is carbon dioxide, 10% of it's methane, 5% of it is noxious gas, which causes acid rain. Here's some more emissions being shown. Just going to zip through here. Actually, it's kind of going down, so that's a good thing. As far as bioaccumulation, we're told not to eat certain fish because they're on the top of the food chain. There's my shrimp. I probably should stop eating shrimp. They tell pregnant women because of mercury not to eat tuna and stuff because tuna fish are predators, especially fancy albacore. Our filter feeders, our clams and stuff, they're accumulating waste just because what they do is they clean water. When I was a kid, my dad did something interesting. He would make salt water and then put the clams in it and rotate the salt water. And I never knew why. And that's why he was cleaning them out, because he was ahead of his time. But these toxic chemicals can accumulate in fish and cause cancer and stuff like that. We know about the PCBs in the Hudson River, especially near Fort Edward. My dad worked for General Electric, and I don't want to say he was a company loyalist, but he didn't believe that this was actually happening. He couldn't believe that his company would do this. And it kind of sounds sad, but I'm almost glad he passed away before it became public, because I think it would have killed him, because he worked from General Electric since he was 17 years old. He started in the mailroom and worked his way up through the company. We almost had to move to Schenectady when we were kids. I know. So, but it accumulated, right? 1.3 million pounds now in defense of General Electric or companies. In 1947, I don't know if they knew any better. I think by 1977 they did. But it's in our fish now. And then we have dioxins, which is released by a product of paper mills using chlorine to make our paper white. Here's just dioxins in our environment. Again, I'm just going to zip through these. Then we use biocides. Anytime you see "side" in a word, it's not good because it means death, right? So bio means that it'll kill everything. Pesticides means it kills pests. So again, DDT was outlawed in 1973. If you could see, those are the eggs. So we could actually do things to help us, right? So we could release ladybugs, which will eat pests. The only problem is ladybugs should fly, so you release them in your garden. How many are going to stay? I used to do this in my garden in California, release ladybugs. You could put bat boxes up, but I'm thinking everyone's kind of a little scared of bats right now with the whole coronavirus thing kicking off. But bats are actually good for the environment. The bat on the right, by the way, is not a bat that you'll see around here. Praying mantises are really good because they eat pests as well. They're really cool. Like, you get a little cocoon, and like thousands come out of this cocoon. And I actually cut open the cocoon after they hatched. Like, where did they all come from? And it's still hard to believe that they came out of that. They'll stick around in your garden just because they don't have a lot of places to go. But unfortunately, they're very, very tiny when they're born, so they become prey. Now we have a global carrying capacity. So the current world population 5 years ago was 7.3 billion. They estimate that the carrying capacity of the world is 10 to 15 billion. Now, again, our carrying capacity as humans keeps on growing because we have a brain and we are able to kind of create things that help us make more food. Our ecological footprint is the total land plus water area needed for all resources a person consumes in a population. So it's estimated that we need 1.7 hectares per person on the planet. Typical person in the US, however, uses 10 hectares. Think about that one, right? Average person needs 1.7. Typical American to sustain us, we need 10. So there's limitations, consequences, and solutions. Here's just kind of an example of how it's kind of broken down. I'm going to zip through it. So if you look at a map of our ecological footprint, it's really kind of out of proportion because it shows the proportional sizes in which we use things. So if you look at us compared to Canada, I mean, although there's more people, I think, in New York State than Canada in our defense. China is huge. India is growing as well. Look at Japan on the right in purple. Japan's a tiny little island and how much it uses. Africa, the whole continent is like small. And then Europe actually uses a large amount. So it's definitely an imbalance as far as the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. Here's something neat. And it's kind of caused some controversy. Some people disagree with this, but if the world, and this was made at the time when the world's population was only 6.9 billion. And how do you read this? Well, if we live in the density as people in Paris do, people of the world population can fit in these 3 states. If we live in the density of San Francisco, you got to add Oklahoma and Texas to it. If we live in the density of New York City, everyone could fit in Texas. London, so New York is more dense than London. The density of Singapore, everyone in the world can fit in these 3 states. And if we lived in the density of Houston, Middle America would be full. Kind of interesting when you think about it, if you're looking at trying to save land. All right, so what have we learned? The use of ladybugs and praying mantis is to consume insect pests in gardens is an example of biocontrol of insect pests, exploitation of insect pests, abiotic control of insect pests, or the use of biocides to control. All right, if you picked A, you are an ecological all-star. So did we reach our aim? Can we understand how we could help return nature to her proper balance? Well, what do we need? Conservation to protect valuable and irreplaceable resources. That's why Yellowstone was formed, ironically, because we wiped out the wolf, but that's why it was sustained. And Yosemite, just because of its aesthetics. Yosemite is actually a beautiful place as well. We can go green. We have the 3 R's. And what's the 4th R again? Reduce. Actually, it should be refuse. I don't know why it says reduce here. And then we're going to end this year with this video. It's posted on your Google Classroom, the most astounding effect. Tie it into thinking like a mountain and the pale blue dot. And that's the end. Okay. I'm going to do some stuff next week, but very little. It's been a great year. I'm really proud of you guys. 2020 is going to really, you're going to be adults and you're going to look back and you're going to realize how strong it's made you. Have an awesome summer. I'll chat with you a little bit next week. But this is pretty much the end.